The way I think of a product's value or an experience's value is it has a functional value, it performs a function, and it provides emotional value. While they're doing it, how do they feel? Car gets you from point A to point B, right? That's their functional value. Now let's look at their emotional value. That's where you get the massive variance in pricing and prestige. It really comes down to emotion. How do you feel when you're in it? How does it portray you? That car becomes sort of a marketing device for you. And it ends up that people will pay a lot of money to market themselves in a very positive way.
Welcome to the Masters of Engineering podcast, cool products, the people who develop them and how they do it. I'm your host, Jon Hirschtick. I've spent my entire life building CAD systems, but the coolest part of my job is getting to meet some of the most awesome product developers on the planet. And in this podcast, you get to meet them too. Now, really excited about my guest today. It's Matt Kressy. He's had a long career designing all sorts of products and being an educator, including being the founder of MIT's Integrated Design and Management program, which you're going to hear a lot more about. Really excited to have you here. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John. Just awesome to be here.
Okay, well, there's kind of two tracks I'm really excited to talk to you about. One is your experiences designing and building products yourself as a consultant, which I don't know so much about. So I'm really excited to learn more. And the other, I'm more familiar with your work in the field of education at RISD, at MIT, and most recently at your newest venture, at NIA. It's the New England Innovation Academy, right? You've spent years educating and practicing product development. Do you have any things on your mind that you say, these are the things I wish product developers would do? These are the top things I see them doing wrong, the top things I emphasize in education.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole long list there. Because product development is complicated. And that's what I love about it, right? It's so complicated that it's rich and you never stop learning, you never stop discovering. And I love the people that do it because they are a certain type of person. They're a person who's courageous and they always feel that something can be improved. But I think that across sort of the industry, there's definitely some things that could be improved. So first of all, is I think better appreciation for what disciplines bring to a project. So for example, when I went to art school, I went to Rhode Island School of Design, and we were not taught what engineers do. We were not taught what business does. And as a result, we didn't really understand our role and our value to those other disciplines. And if you don't understand that value, it makes it very hard to be a contributor on a team that's multidisciplinary. And as we all know, anything that's worth doing it requires a multidisciplinary team. And so I think when I was at RISD, I intuitively sensed this. And when I left RISD, I had trouble getting a job, actually. And
oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. No. Well. What we kind of coined was that RISD is really good at creating senior designers, and it's tough to get that senior designer job with zero experience, right? When you graduate, and so it was very difficult for most RISD students, at least back in my day. It was very difficult to get that first job because we had that kind of strategic thinking, but we didn't have those sort of hardcore rendering skills that design continuum could bill out immediately, So the business model was not working for us RISD grads. Now, other schools produced exactly that. But back to my point, so when I got out, I became entrepreneurial, was put on multidisciplinary teams, and I just loved it because I was in these startups with all kinds of different disciplines. I was learning marketing and business and engineering and manufacturing. I love the idea of designing for scale, and repeatability, designing for, robust, quality. I love that. I love going to factories that are making product for me, and working with them on the line to kind of make that more streamlined. And what
Really?
design does is they really make a product or an experience, whatever you're creating, everything's an experience. They're really making that experience desirable or valuable to your customer. And my God, that's like the most important thing. The first thing you want to do is create value to your customer. And then you need to figure out, how do I scale it? How do I reproduce it? How do I make it reliable?
But back to your point, multidisciplinary and design, you said, what you just said, design is the big opportunity.
Yeah, they can, there's much more they can do on design.
Because everyone thinks they're like, I'm sure anyone listening to this and who's a pro, the kind of people who are my customers in selling CAD and data management and so forth, that wouldn't they all be thinking, well, we do design, what is Matt talking about here at Acme Corp? We, designing our product, and we're very design oriented. So is this a self-perception versus reality thing?
Probably. And when I say design, I'm talking about that discipline that improves the user's experience.
The user's experience. So that's how you define design, not winning an award or something. You're just saying improves the user's experience, which of course, great appearance does improve experience. And
styling is just one part of design. Yeah. The other part of it is, the way I think of a product's value or an experience's value is it has a functional value. It performs a function for the user or the person experiencing it. And it provides emotional value in that while they're doing it, how do they feel? Right. So let's say a car gets you from point A to point B, right? Yeah. Lots of cars do that really, really well. Okay. Yeah. Now the question is, that's their functional value. Now let's look at their emotional value. That's where you get the massive variance in pricing, right? And prestige. It really comes down to emotion. How do you feel when you're in it? How does it portray you? Right? That car becomes sort of a marketing device for you. And it ends up that people will pay a lot of money to market themselves in a very positive way. But then is, how does it look? And that's the part where you get those massive markups. And so if you leverage design, you have the potential, it's the big opportunity to raise your prices, increase your profit. Now you'll have to price things a little differently. You'll have to start practicing, like value-based pricing, right? As opposed to cost up. But if you can develop that practice, that's lost revenue that you can now capture.
You now have founded a new high school. You've been part of the founding team. I should say, like you said, multidisciplinary, but you're involved in founding a new high school. Can you tell us about that? Well,
yeah, boy, it has been amazing. It's been an amazing experience, very challenging. But basically what we did is we took the MIT Integrated Design and Management curriculum and we reimagined it for middle school and high school students.
Wow.
So imagine teaching product design and multidisciplinary design approaches, human-centered design or design thinking to an 11-year-old, and then ask them to invent a product that I would want to buy. What do you think the outcome would be? Yeah. I think everyone listening to this is probably like, I'm skeptical an 11-year-old could produce a product.
Isn't this what college is for,
right?
Or life beyond college? Why would, yeah. So
they killed it. We taught 11-year-olds some basic techniques with Illustrator, how to draw a line, how to use Pathfinder tools. We gave them some clock movements, for $2.50 each. And we said, design a clock using Illustrator. You have to keep it under 11 inches square. And then we're going to have you use the laser cutter to cut these clocks out.
Okay.
And so we bought a Glowforge, and we have a couple of laser cutters, but the Glowforge is what we had them use. And they made these clocks, and it was just unbelievable. the clocks were gorgeous, beautiful, so professional. We taught them to present. We taught them about design reviews, how to give feedback, how to collaborate, how to continually build and help each other. And collaboration is another thing that when you ask me what's important in terms of successful product design or development, it is that collaboration. And it's not just sort of tolerating each other on a team.
Yeah.
It's enthusiasm for achieving something amazing together, right?
Nice
if you don't have that, it's just, you might get it done, but it's not going to be magical.
So you categorically think introducing an 11-year-old to a design process at an appropriate level, you think there's real benefit in that compared to waiting till like traditionally college. And by the way, that's probably what happened with other subjects. I'm guessing there was a time where mathematics was for the university and, regular kids didn't need it. You learned that, advanced subject. But you think, I find that fascinating. And, that you think that way. And of course, we're seeing STEM come into younger curriculums, but STEM isn't the same as design, right?
Yeah. And I think everything that I've taught, I've talked about design as the opportunity, but I don't want to give the impression that engineering and business are not equally important, right? Mm-hmm. The only reason that I'm harping on design is that if it's a stool, the design leg is a little short, so let's just build that out, and you're still going to need all three legs. So at IDM, the cohort was comprised of 1/3 designers, 1/3 engineers, and 1/3 folks with business or entrepreneurial backgrounds. Okay. So we always had this balance.
Yeah.
And we taught those students to appreciate each other.
So you were educating in multidisciplinary, which is really interesting because I find that to be not, and that's what you're doing, I think, previously. And we're going actually, before we get off of the subject of the New England Innovation Academy, I just want to, for listeners that might be interested, can you tell us a little more? They may be thinking this could be great for one of my children or someone I know. I understand from talking to you, it's for both people. The school itself is in the Boston metro area, right? And you can, if you're local to the Boston area, you can commute, but you also take residential students, right?
That's correct.
Come from other regions or even other countries, right?
Yep, that's right. And we have some beautiful dorms we just built, and each room has its own bathroom, which is like unheard of for, I know.
That's nicer than college, right?
It's a gorgeous facility in Marlborough.
In Marlborough, Massachusetts, which for listeners, it's what is it? Half an hour outside of Boston, if that.
Yeah, that's right.
But you can come from anywhere in the world. And how would listeners find out more about this school?
So I think the easiest thing would be to go to our website, and that URL is neiacademy.org. Okay. Go there, and you'll get all kinds of information. You can even contact me through there as well.
Okay. Great. Now you started to touch on what was happening at MIT Integrated Design and Management Program. I got this. I really want to talk about this because what's interesting, and among everything else, is that's a product you built in a sense. This program, right? Yeah. I find it interesting. You built a product to train people to build products. Which is really
exactly.
Cool. High school too.
And I used the process that we teach to build products to build that.
Oh, you actually use the design. Okay, the process you teach. Now, when you say the process you teach, is there a name for it? Is it a certain text that you use or your own?
That's a great question. And I really need to sort of document this in some sort of form. But it's sort of a combination of human-centered design, and just sort of straight up pure design vision. And the integration of engineering and business. So it's sort of this, integrated design and management process. It's actually a pretty good name for it, as kind of dry as it sounds.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't sound dry.
But that human-centered design part is what I use to design the curriculum for IDM, or design the program, right? And the culture of IDM. And then I did that again in creating the design for NIA. And in that case, I actually used IDM students to help me. So I was able to kind of, build off of a structure that already existed, and that was just fantastic. So, and I'll just say a little bit more about, for NIA, it's a beautiful place. And here's why. We have a culture there that is so accepting, and it's so much about belonging and togetherness. It's just that appreciation people have for each other. We have that, and the energy there is just so, it's vibrant, it's positive, it's supportive. Not to say people don't get in arguments and stuff, but it always reverts to this like beautiful place. Now, what's great about that is that now everyone feels safe. You got an 11-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old, they feel safe, right? Now, when I say, okay, we want you to design a product that doesn't exist, that's really hard to make, they have a solid platform to spring off of and fail. And they know that everyone in the school is also failing. And so we're not going to make fun of each other. Yeah. So that's, the culture is this amazing thing. And then the other thing is that we create curriculum that is multidisciplinary and connected. Okay, we call that integrated curriculum. So what that means is that if you're learning something in science class, that some theory or concept, you might be practicing that concept in Innovation Studio and building something using that theory or concept. Same thing with math, So for example, if it was a project building a trebuchet, a catapult, sure. Science would be talking about, exactly. Science would talk about, materials and the geography of England, 400, AD. And then you'd have math class talking about how to calculate trajectories and things like that. There could be discussions about air density and gravity and, just all this great stuff. And then in the afternoon, they're applying all of these things to making this catapult, and in humanities class, they're learning about the history. So this weaving of everything together is, we believe, going to result in extremely deep understanding of all of these things, right? And something that you will retain for a very long time.
But anyway, so you founded a new program at MIT. I've been lucky enough to visit you, and I've worked with some of your students.
That's right.
Who have been awesome. Again, to audience, connecting the dots here. If you're looking for the right kind of person to capitalize on the design is the opportunity moment, looking for MIT IDM alum, good idea, right? We don't have, Matt doesn't get, neither one of us say interest in you doing that, just pointing out they're good. They're great students who come out. Let me ask you about another, this is me prompting you for something we're interested in these days. What about the concept of Agile process coming over from the world of software engineering? I'm hearing more and more of my customers, and we just had an event this week, a couple of days with some of our customers, where we spent a lot of time with them. And we presented on this topic, but we heard customers mentioning, we're going to an Agile process where, we're doing things more like we're designing hardware more like software. Is that a thing in your world too? Do you see that, or do you see it at all? What do you think of it?
Well, I know that, just prior to me leaving IDM, I'm still at MIT, but prior to giving up my, full-time job running the program, we were incorporating a lot of Agile processes into our teaching. Yeah. And, it was mostly, to keep things on schedule and on track and things like that. But I do think that there was value in that process to tap the team for feedback every week, right? And so it really was wonderful because instead of like a design review once a month where you get that kind of crowdsourcing of ideas, you were getting it once a week from your team, and it was quite efficient. So yeah, I think Agile is really great, but a lot of Agile is very similar to what you actually learn in design school. It's you have a design brief. You can find the overlaps here, but you have a design brief, you make a bunch of concepts, you get feedback on those concepts, you synthesize from there, you do another batch of concepts, this very iterative process. It's super fast. And then, so efficiency happens in that way as well.
But you just made me realize something, because I get what you're saying. It wasn't the same. It wasn't exactly, time box sprints, but there was a karmic resonance with it and similarity. And now I realize why, when I got in the software business, Agile process wasn't a thing yet. It was before the Agile manifesto and the word, capital A Agile, capital P process, and Scrums and Kanban and all that. We weren't talking that way, but I had an affinity for an Agile process, the idea of building software quickly, not relying on big specs and waterfalls a year later. And I think now, for the first time in my life, at this moment, I'm connecting the dots as to why I might have felt that way, because I came out of that design curriculum, and now I realize it. That's what made me look at waterfall and say, I don't feel like I like that. I'd been trained in it. And so anyway, you've helped me. I don't want to get too much into, but it may help some people in the audience. So you're like, Agile process is a thing for people to think about as they go into it. And I happen to agree,
One other thought about Agile is that, Agile tends to decompose, right? Break things apart. And then you have small teams working on one small element, right?
Yeah, Scrum team.
And And so that's also true with good sort of design process, where you, like, just how I decompose a product's value into functional and emotional.
Yeah.
You could have two teams working on those two different things, all designers, or multidisciplinary, even better, right? So that also, I thought, was really a wonderful kind of crossover.
I could talk to you all day about MIT and NIA, but let me turn to another fascinating part of who you are, which is, you don't just teach this stuff, you do it, right? And you've done a lot of product development. Tell us about, just give me the story on you as a product developer.
All right. Yeah. Got out of college, couldn't get that job, settled in the Boston area with my wife, Kara, who's an architect.
Oh, your wife's an architect. Okay.
Yeah.
Figures. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, it was great. Really handy when we designed our house, and it was awesome. But, I became very entrepreneurial right out of college. I actually was selling furniture at a furniture store on Memorial Drive called Seats. I don't know if you remember that. And the guy running that store, John, was a guy named Neil Yanofsky. And Neil, to this day, he mentored me. We were on a little Mac SE with an 8-inch monitor, monochrome, and he would stay after work, bless his heart, as an HBS grad, and he would teach me how to use Lotus 1-2-3. And I because I wanted to learn business. I thought it was important as a designer to understand that. Plus, I wanted to make my own products and sell them, So working in this furniture store is amazing. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And Neil went off to grandiose things, most notably, president of Dunkin' Donuts International, and then president of Panera Bread. And he grew them from 150 stores to what they are now. And he comes and talks in our programs. And also this gets to another point. Your first question here was, what's most valuable? Networks and connections and love for each other, which I was kind of touching, which I think is, Neil was a mentor of mine. you are a mentor of mine.
Oh, I'm flattered and honored, but thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I learned so much, and I think that what I've noticed with really high level achievers is we all really relish each other,
Well, I've learned from you too, by the way.
Well,
I just want to say, but go on.
And that's a beautiful thing, right? And it transcends our professions. It's what makes a good human being, and it makes good society, and it makes better commerce, and it makes profit, and it makes beautiful families and all this stuff. And that's something that we need to teach. But so I started designing. I designed this clock.
Really nice, you say. Yeah.
And it's hanging here off screen. And I asked Neil, can I hang it in the furniture store and take orders? And he said, sure. So I made a clock, and I put it on the furniture store wall, and I put it on consignment, and before you know it, I started selling these clocks, $400 a piece.
Really?
And I quit my job. I got a few more showrooms in Boston. I got some showrooms in New York City. I was just making clocks. I started outsourcing some of the components and builds, and working with various vendors. And one day, a designer walked into the store. This is maybe 3 or 4 years after I had left RISD and the furniture store. And the designer said, whoever designed that clock, I have a job for them in my firm. That's how I got my first design job.
I never knew about these clocks and everything.
Yeah.
So you built the clocks, and so then you decided you'd rather have a job. So that design job, was it building at a company building products, or?
It was an exhibit design firm.
Exhibits. Sure.
Harvard Square. It's called Zalisk Martin. It was on Bow Street. And again, what a phenomenal experience and opportunity for learning. And while I was there, I started taking some freelance work. And one of my clients quit his job and said, hey, I have an idea for a product. If you design it for me, will you do it for free, and I'll give you some equity in the company? And I was like, okay, sure. Plus it was my first plastic, product that I could, I could have a mold made and make plastic parts. So, and it was basically one of the first caller ID devices, before caller ID was ubiquitous. That's what it was. And then I got a call from him, after I designed it, and he said, hey, show up Thursday night at this office in Wellesley. And I did. And he said, okay, there's the 5 guys here. You're the founders of this new company. And so we started this company in the sort of telephony market. We made caller ID units and voicemail indicators, and then we started getting we started doing a lot of private labeling, OEM manufacturing for Thompson Consumer Electronics and Radio Shack and Northern Telecom. And we went from negative $300,000 our first year. And by the 4th year, I think we were doing about 15 million a year in revenue. And, for me, that was like mind boggling, millions of dollars. What the heck, and I know it's small potatoes, but it was really my first experience kind of seeing something scale to that. And then from there, I got a call from RISD, and they said, Matt, we've heard about a lot of the work you're doing, professionally. We'd love you to teach this class that's a collaboration with Harvard Business School. Okay. And that was my first teaching experience for RISD, was bringing our students at RISD to Harvard Business School, sat in class at HBS, and they developed products, just like what we were to do a year later at MIT. So that was the first experience. And we had this amazing textbook at Harvard. I was like, this class is pretty good, but this textbook is excellent. And so we had some intellectual property issues. Harvard felt that they own the students' IP. I don't know if you know this. But so I was like, because I had sort of a business background at this point, I was like, who owns this IP? And they're like, oh, Harvard does. I'm like, you can't own RISD's, students' IP. who negotiated this, And so we ended up shutting that down over that reason. And then I got moved over we moved over to MIT. And I remember the first time I walked into Steve's office to meet him, my new collaborator, and I see all the textbooks lined up on the wall. And I'm like, oh, this is a great sign. This is a wonderful book. And he's like, I'm glad you like it. I wrote it.
Yeah,
so
right.
That was like, I was like, okay, I'm in the right place. But anyway, that's when the teaching got started. And, I kept developing products, more and more products.
So how many products have you been involved in developing in your
hundreds.
practice? I mean, hundreds. Okay,
Hundreds.
Tell me,
yeah.
I need a couple more stories besides the collar product. So you love the collar products.
Okay.
Tell me a product you worked on that you wish you'd never worked on. Everyone has one of those. I could tell you mine, but is there one in particular that you'd say this was a bad one?
God. Yeah, this was a product for the company that makes lava lights.
Okay.
And this was something that was similar to that, but it used two different density fluids to create the effect of stuff kind of, it used like some water with salt and color in it, right? To make it heavy, hard. And then we had silicone oil, and we would pump, we had a pump, and it would shoot this colored water up into the oil, and then it would slowly fall down through the oil. Okay.
Sounds good.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We had a light in there and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Jon. So hard. I mean, the amount of energy I put in, I've done medical products, and this was probably 4 times harder than some of the most complicated medical products I've done.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Haggerty canceled, they canceled the order, and my factory made them. And so there was this container load of these products that were thrown away with all this silicone oil. I just feel so terrible about it because of the environmental kind of impact of that. And that was when I really started saying, okay, we have to be responsible designers and entrepreneurs, and then ethics and responsibility and the idea of doing good for the earth became a huge part of the curriculum of everything that I teach.
That's wonderful that you do that. And tell me, I don't want to end on a bad note. I want to know, besides the caller ID products and the clocks, tell me about a product that you just look back and say, that's one of my greatest projects, my greatest memories.
Probably that would be a medical device.
Okay.
And it's because I think it was incredibly challenging. The goal was to create what's called a stereotactic needle localizing device that will basically identify where a cancerous lesion is in breast tissue. Okay. Wow. And so stereotactic means that it locates that lesion using 2 views, 90 degrees opposing each other. We were right on the cutting edge of kind of digitizing X-rays, mammography, output, and using some algorithms, we were able to really identify exactly where that lesion was. Now, the thing is that the way this process works is that, and you're dealing with breasts, and breasts are all different sizes and densities, and when you X-ray them, they change their shape. So, yeah, because you're flattening them, you're putting them under pressure. You probably heard women complain about how uncomfortable this is. So what we did though is, I had to figure out how to stabilize a breast and keep it into one shape, X-ray it from 2 angles, find out where that lesion is, and then be able to place a needle into the breast tissue where the tip of that needle is plus or minus 2 millimeters from the lesion. And it had to be done for the product. The procedure would have to be about $250. And there were devices out there that did this robotically, but they were, $500,000. So that was the challenge, and we did it.
You did it.
We did.
Wow. When did you produce this product?
So it's probably back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it failed because of the business team fell apart.
Oh.
But the product and the technology is all really good. Yeah.
Oh, that's a little bit of a bittersweet, but the design,
Yeah.
that's an incredible, wow. We could have probably spent the whole podcast talking about this particular product design, but that's an amazing,
It was
I
incredible.
can't
And the
even begin to
process,
imagine it.
yeah, and the process you had to use, I had to identify all the stakeholders. It's where I learned that, patients experience these products, doctors use them, hospitals buy them, right? It was not just technically challenging, it was emotionally challenging.
I have to say, what a rewarding product. I think you have touched the lives of so many people who have worked on your products, but so many product developers you've educated, and probably many others who will benefit from the ripple effects of your curriculum and other institutions. And so can't thank you enough for joining us today, Matt.
A pleasure, John, as always.
Yeah.
It was just awesome. Thank you for
Well,
having me.
and we're gonna so much to talk about. So to our listeners today, I want to thank you, and our viewers on YouTube. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for tuning in, for watching. You can learn more about NEIA, the New England Innovation Academy, at, we said earlier, neiacademy.org, or Matt offered to put his email in here. It's mkressy@mit.edu. That's MKRESSY@mit.edu, right, Matt? You said it was okay to do that.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. And you can listen to other episodes of this podcast, Masters of Engineering, or subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. And recently, we've been doing these as video as well, and you can catch the videos on YouTube. I love hearing what you think, so make sure you leave a review of this episode and tell me what you thought of Matt and his story and me. You can follow me on Twitter at J Hirschtick, JHIRSCHTICK. Again, thank you, Matt. That's it for today. See you all next time on Masters of Engineering.